to you about building strong teams. And like I said, be here for the first Plato event. And I've actually been a part of Plato since the very beginning, since the product launched in May of 2017 last year. And it's really great to see the growth of the mentors and the mentees in this community. I'm Shivani Sharma, and I'm a senior engineering manager here at Slack. And I manage the user experience team for Android, iOS, and web. So I'd like to start off by framing the day with this great quote by Reid Hoffman. So no matter how brilliant your mind or strategy, if you're playing a solo game, you're always going to lose out to a team. And that's why we're here to talk today. So first, raise your hand if you have ever felt the magic of being on a high-performing team at any point in your career, as an engineer, as a manager. Awesome. Wow, that's actually quite a few of you. All right, I have too, and on a number of different teams, both as an engineer and as a manager. So I'm first going to talk about my time at Google. So the first time I experienced a high-performing team was when I was an engineer working to improve the reliability of our ETL jobs on the data team so that financial reports could be generated accurately from the data warehouse without any manual intervention. When I joined that team, there was daily manual intervention. And unfortunately, all those jobs kicked off at midnight. So between midnight and 6 a.m., in order to meet our 9 a.m. service level agreement, we were up all night. So we had a rotational, we rotated with engineers. There were 3 other engineers on my team. We rotated duties, and slowly but surely, we improved the system little by little in 6 months. It wasn't exciting work, and the hours were grueling, of course. And nonetheless, we accomplished our goal. And we had a lot of fun and bonded while doing that. The second time was at IBM, and I managed a team there that was tasked to build a security system that integrated with our platform. And it was a challenge because our platform didn't have the full capability that we needed to build this next generation security tool. And it required also a tedious certification that had to be done by an external certification lab in order for us to even sell to federal customers here in the US. Now, the government here, that's actually a lot of money that we would get from selling to the US. So we had developers and QA both here and out in Singapore. So there was another layer of coordination and communication challenge that happened there. We reached that goal. We increased the revenue by a significant amount on that team, and we captured the federal market by delivering that tool and getting it certified. We also bonded as a team, even though we had remote employees, but we got to celebrate in person at the end, which was really great. I think one of the engineers from Singapore even cried because he was so happy, and it was really, really touching. All right, and Slack. That's where I'm at right now. I've been there for almost 3 years, since 2015. And in my time, the number of employees has quadrupled. So as Slack's business has grown, so have the number of employees. And with new people coming through the door every couple of weeks, the composition and the dynamic of those teams across the company, including mine, was constantly changing. And that meant continuously building cohesion between those new team members and my team, but then also with other teams and departments so that we could have cooperation. And with all of these experiences, there are some common traits. And there's a lot of people here that have also felt the synergy of being on a high-performing team. So maybe you haven't thought explicitly about it, but I'm going to go through some of those common traits. So the first one is trust. And on those teams, everyone knew exactly their role, and everyone was focused on their own tasks while letting others focus on theirs, because we all trusted one another to do each other's job. When you don't trust someone, do you ever find yourself wanting to look over their shoulder and double check everything that they're doing, wanting to weigh in on any decision that someone else is making? So when there's trust, there's less effort that goes to that, and actually more effort that goes to building and achieving your goal. Second is conflict resolution. Slides. Hold on. There we go. So we were able to resolve disagreements promptly and effectively. And because we were focused on this goal, it was about figuring out how we were going to achieve it together. And this is an important one because when every new team member is joining your team or any new person from another team that's coming in to help on a project, they're going to be observing how you're resolving disagreements. And as you do this consistently, and if you do it consistently well, over time that builds the culture of how you disagree and how you resolve conflict. So doing this well consistently is what builds a healthy team. And then there was high pressure in all of these situations. So a lot to do, not enough time, and there's always a lot of money at stake as well. And with an aggressive timeline, we have to move forward, and there's no time to really endlessly debate about issues. Generally, when goals are unclear or people feel like they're solving different problems but think it's the same problem, that's when there's a lot of squabbling that happens on the team. But the pressure is also important in a sense because it prevents complacency as well. So there's continued drive to achieve that goal and do it together. So we talked about goals. So we need to work together to achieve the team goal to deliver results. And at Google, it was how we were going to improve the reliability of that ETL data system. And at IBM, it was how we were going to build this tool and make sure it integrated with the platform, even though the capability wasn't there. And how do we get the buy-in from the platform team to get the stuff that we needed in order to deliver this and certify and capture the market. So there's nothing without trust and conflict resolution. That is the most important thing. And that actually equals to psychological safety. So if you haven't heard of this article, there's a great article in the New York Times, and it's about how Google analyzed what makes a productive team. So Google, being very data-oriented, they sliced and diced all combinations of the attributes that they thought might contribute to a high productive team. So, they're like, what if a team is made up of all introverts? Or what about all extroverts? How about IQ? How about a mix or a different ratio of these combinations? But what it ultimately boiled down to was psychological safety. And psychological safety is demonstrated by everyone participating equally in discussions, and that there's a shared belief that there will be no consequences for being punished or humiliated for speaking up for ideas, questions, or concerns or mistakes. So people feel open to sharing their ideas. It doesn't matter how junior or senior you are on the team or how tenured, people are open to listen. And in an environment of psychological safety, you get diverse perspectives actually being voiced out in the open. And from diverse perspectives, there are many studies out there that say that teams that are diverse outperform. And there is no point in having a team that blindly agrees with one another, because you're not going to be able to innovate, you're not going to get diverse ideas, and that's the study there. So let's see. All right, culture. So along with psychological safety, culture is also an extremely important part of building strong teams as well. Culture is the social behaviors and norms found in human society. And the different attributes that make up cultures are customs, values, attitudes, and beliefs. And these categories reinforce one another to create cultural norms. And each person has their own combination of these attributes that molds and shapes the lens in which they view the world. And it's based on things like family values, ethnic backgrounds, and the associated traditions and rituals with that. It could also be educational history, so whether someone is self-taught or whether they went to a traditional university and got a computer science degree, or whether they have an advanced degree or have a PhD, or whether they did a boot camp like Hackbright. There's also work history. So the way people work also, their history influences that, because how your experience from working at only large companies will be drastically different in how you solve problems if you've only worked at small, scrappy startups. And there's also general life experiences, right? So if you've got a team that's come together, everyone has had their own unique journey to get to where they are today together in the same room. So culture and now companies. So companies and teams are groups of people too, and they also have cultural norms, but with an absence of a shared history. And unlike families or ethnic groups, when people come together to form teams and companies, they don't have any shared values, and so we need to actually create those shared values. So what do you do? So one, if you're a startup and you've suddenly gotten funding and you have to hire lots of people and you want to make sure that the synergy that you had with your co-founders is able to scale and you're able to be just as quick and productive, it's important to hold an offsite to talk about your company values. The Slack founders did that, and they did it again more recently with a bunch of engineers, because values can also evolve as you scale. But it's important to have values because that is the shared value that these people will have in common when they join your company, and it grounds them. It's also important to recruit for company values and complementary strengths on your team. So know who your culture champions are and have them be an active part of your interviewing process and your onboarding process. Incentivize company values. So people use company values to guide their decisions and behavior. So for example, Slack's value is empathy. So that can be empathy for one another and also empathy for our customers. And this dictates how people interact with one another and also in problem solving together for any customer issues. So it isn't, oh, that's not my team's problem, I'm gonna kick it over the fence to the core product team, which at a lot of companies is the kitchen sink for all things that we don't know where they belong. That doesn't happen at Slack. Instead, it's, well, we have empathy for our customer. I know something, you know something, let's sit together and let's work on it. We have an award called Win of the Week, so that's a giant 3-foot trophy that looks really ridiculous when it sits on the engineers' desks. So team and department awards are really great for incentivizing these values. So we generally try to reward the type of work that generally goes overlooked or things that aren't announced, like big product launches or large refactors. So this is a way that engineers actually nominate one another, so it's peer-to-peer recognition. And over time and with consistency, as these new people join, they observe how things are rewarded. A little bit of culture is built with every interaction. Next is setting clear and measurable goals. We use OKRs at Slack, so that's objective and key results. There's a great book here called Measure What Matters. It goes deep into how Google uses OKRs. They use it very aggressively, and it served them well as they are a giant company now. And it keeps people aligned on the right goals, and it keeps people clear on what they're trying to accomplish. So it's important to also repeat these at the beginning of the quarter, midway at the quarter, to remind people, if you haven't gotten started on something, maybe we should get started so we can complete it by the end of the quarter. And it's also really great to recap, what did we solve? What are some things that we learned? Maybe we need to add new goals for the next quarter, or we need to pivot goals because we realize that goal that we had last quarter actually didn't make sense because we found some stuff while we were digging into the data, and actually it makes sense to measure something else. So I highly recommend this book. The other is to learn from failure. So we practice blameless postmortems engineering-wide, and it's important for psychological safety. And for that way you can learn from your mistakes, which ultimately is important for innovation. So if people are too scared to take risks, they won't ship fast enough, and you'll lose the lead in the market. So another thing is also to have retrospectives. So I do them at the end of every project. We also do them periodically to revisit just our processes that we have, our team meetings, our communication, and we really look at everything. And so just having a regular practice of having retros and blameless postmortems allows you to have this like iterative and pivoting culture. And the makeup of our blameless postmortem, there's a lot of articles out there. We talk about the timeline of what happened, what the impact of the issue was, contributing factors to the problem that happened, and how do we prevent it in the future. And then we have action items so that we can maybe add more unit tests or, gosh, I don't know, a checklist. There's a number of things that can come out of it depending on what the postmortem's about. And this is a way to not repeat the same mistakes over and over again. So it's okay to have problems happen, just not the same problems. Weekly one-on-ones and staff meetings. So my recommendation is don't cancel your one-on-ones or your staff meetings because it's an opportunity for bonding and building trust. Engineers are heads down, or they might be collaborating with other people or QA and other teams to accomplish their cross-functional goals. But having a steady weekly one-on-one and a weekly team meeting is a way for people to actually see each other's faces. And building that familiarity is important because people tend to trust people that they know. Second to last, reserving conflict promptly. So this is also a really great book called Difficult Conversations. It's a newer version of Crucial Conversations, which I think was popular in the late 90s. So I've had teams actually read this book and discuss learnings. It's a very fast read. It's great to have a hard copy versus the digital copy because you can skim through it. And what was great about having the entire team read it, especially if it's a more junior team or a team that hasn't worked at a large established startup, if it's always been scrappy startups, then they might not be the best at resolving conflict at like a larger mature company. And so this helped have a shared structure and a language to talk about the disagreements. And because people were trying to do the same thing, they would understand what the other person's doing, and there was just a little bit more familiarity with the communication. And one thing that we also did on teams that were particularly dysfunctional is we even had a meta discussion about how we did actually resolving that conflict. And that actually was a much nicer conversation because you're actually just focused on the actual process, like, oh, did I do this step right? Or like, oh, actually, I meant to actually say this. And they're building the muscles for that skill, but they're also bonding by actually talking about something that they were both struggling to do together, right? So highly recommend this. And as a manager, it's important for you to facilitate and coach your team to be able to do this well, because you won't be in the room for every discussion. That's not a good way to scale yourself. So this is a great way to actually coach your team. And last but not least, having regular team lunches and offsites. I think for all of the reasons that I already said previously, unstructured time for team bonding is important for getting to know one another because people trust people they know over people that they don't. So when there's familiarity and you get to know a little bit about someone's personal life, like, hey, we went to the same university, or hey, we're from the same hometown, or we have the same hobbies, that is building some similarities, and the more similarities that people have, the more that they'll gel together. So here's a summary of those 8 points, and I think we'll move on to questions. And that you can find me on Twitter if you have any questions under Shivani Sharma 29.
Thanks, Shivani. For those that have a question, we encourage you to participate and get involved. Again, it's sli.do through the browser, and the event name is Elevate 2018. Our first question comes from a gentleman named Henry. What have successful new employees done best to quickly become an integral part of the team? I.e., how can new hires make the onboarding easier and successful for themselves?
Yeah, that's great. So I would say that a lot of it is, do they have good onboarding? Well, understanding the lay of the land. So something that I do for all new hires on my team, regardless of their seniority, is I give them a lay of the land of who's who on our team, who are the teams that we probably that we work with more frequently. And then I also, depending on if it's an Android engineer on my team or iOS, front end or back end, I also give them key people to get to know in their discipline as well, so that they can meet the Android infrastructure manager and the iOS infrastructure manager and some of the tech leads on those teams. And so that way you have, like, yes, they're responsible for my product area for new user experience, but then they're also in the know of the infrastructure and kind of the technology goals that we have for each functional group. And getting to know that, then they kind of understand the holistic view of what's going on in the company, not just our product team and just narrow focus on like, I'm building this product and that's it. So I actually, I kind of map it out. So I have like a 3-week plan, and throughout the weeks, I suggest a handful of people to meet, and first it's the initial team, then a little bit wider, and then a little bit wider across the company, and then just based on things that I might know about the person, I might just also suggest like not necessarily the same discipline, but someone that they might have common interests with, or maybe background on the same school or previous company that they both worked at, so that there's some bonding, so that at least they have somebody that they can get to know. We also assign onboarding mentors to each person. It's not necessarily like a mentor of like teaching you about the technology, and it doesn't matter if it's a more junior person as an onboarding mentor for someone more senior. It's actually just having a familiar face to ask questions about, how do I do this thing? Where do I go to find this information? And it's just having a go-to person so you don't have to ask in the public Slack channels all the time.
Thank you. What do you go over in your staff meetings?
A lot of things. So I try to think of a topic that would be interesting or more relevant from maybe a greater all hands that we've had. So sometimes it's, especially if it's something more controversial or something that I think that people might have thoughts about, I generally will put those on the agenda. But the agenda is open for anyone to add to. So engineers will ask specific things about performance reviews or anything that's upcoming that's concerning them, or talking about hiring, when are we going to get headcount, we need more help. So it's actually a collaborative agenda that we have, but I try to pick something that is either bringing something down from upper management to bring more transparency to things that they might not have visibility for, or going deeper on something that is good for us to talk about as a team on what's going on with the company. Additionally, we sometimes use, if we don't have anything, we'll sometimes use that time to do retrospectives on processes. So, we've got a whole hour blocked off, like I won't cancel them. Instead, it's like, hey, it's been about a month. Every month we'll do a retro on like ways we can use Jira better, or ways that we can be more efficient at documentation and test writing. So we use it for a variety of things.
Our next question comes from Justin, and the question is, how do you handle cross-functional postmortems as opposed to technical ones, i.e. a problem with product prioritization or execution?
So product prioritization, so a cross-functional postmortem would be one for probably a particular project. So you might have Android and iOS engineers, back-end engineers, designers, user research. We'll have the analysts in there as well if we didn't measure something appropriately and we wasted a week not collecting the right data. So we go through that same flow. We talked about what happened, and we also get out like all the things that we think went wrong. We talk about all the things that went right. And we talk about things that we could do in the future if we were to have a similar project. So it's kind of like an air of the grievances. So we use a Trello board for product type or cross-functional retros and postmortems. I call them retros, not postmortems, because it wasn't an actual incident. It could be a number of things that could have just been done better on the team for that project. So a Trello board with what went well, what didn't go so well, what are some things we can do better in the future, and immediate things that we're going to change right away, and action items.
Next question. What is a cultural champion, or a person that's a champion of the culture? Who are they, and how do you find them?
Yeah, so cultural champions can be early employees of the company. They can be people that go out of their way. So yes, they deliver on their work, but they're doing other things like organizing our offsites. So some people are like, let's do lunch, let's do offsites, or people that naturally get groups of people together to do a game night. So I've got a few cultural champions in my product area. And we just had a game night a couple weeks ago, and it's something that like, hey, do we want to do this regularly or once in a while? But they keep an eye out on ways to bond the team and to plan informal events like that. And I generally try to just fund the pizza or the drinks or whatever along with that. But it's important that it comes organically from the people on your team, because sometimes when it's coming from me, it's mandatory fun time, which might not be fun for everybody. So I actually encourage them when we're in our one-on-ones to continue doing that. And we have folks that are like that we across the company that we've also trained up to, so that we all do the same questions for onboarding, so that we're actually consistent in hiring people with the values that we're looking for.
Thank you. Next question. Can you build a high-performing team where engineers average 25 hours a week at the keyboard? If so, how?
What does that mean?
I'll take that as, if engineers are so busy,
Yes.
how do you get them to become part of the team that can be high-performing?
Yeah, so that's part of why not canceling your one-on-ones and your team meetings is important. And also we also have quarterly offsites for my team as well, and it's a break from your day-to-day. We also at Slack, in order to encourage the team bonding and just company bonding in general, we have a 5 p.m. happy hour, and it has different themes. It's every Thursday, and there's food involved. So if not staying, you don't have to stay very late. I will usually be there for about an hour, and sometimes you'll see groups of people from their team sitting down and casually chatting over a glass of wine or beer or non-alcoholic beverage and some food.
Next question. How do you incorporate individual goals, i.e. an engineer wanting to learn new technologies, with the overall arching business or organizational goals?
Yeah, so when we're doing quarterly planning, so I encourage folks I have monthly career growth conversations with my team as well. So it's blocked off on our calendar. I invite everyone that reports to me to that, so they know that, okay, this week, last week of the month, I know that we're going to be talking about career growth. And that can be supporting them in their personal goals as well, learning of new technology, or if they're wanting to pivot in their role. So we usually talk about that in that monthly conversation, and I try to look out for projects that might help or connect them with people in the company that know that skill really well, or suggest some trainings or online courses that I'm aware of. And also we have 20% time sometimes, I would say, when they're not exclusively staffed on a high velocity project. Usually it's not one after another, so generally when there's a little bit of a break in between big projects, they'll have time to dabble in that. But I hold them accountable because we keep track of those career growth conversations in the document and how that's mapping to their career growth. Additionally, I also make sure to keep in mind that a promotion and growth in their career, it means adding more business value. That is what a promotion is. It isn't I'm an Android engineer and I learned how to do some data stuff. It's you actually in the business world, or in the actual work sense, adding more value in the role that you're in. That is what constitutes a promotion.
Next question. What are some tactics or strategies you utilize to make remote employees feel motivated to be part of the team when they're remote? And how do you leverage your one-on-one sessions or your face-to-face meetings with them?
Yeah, so when I was at IBM, it was interesting. I think because IBM is a largely distributed, global company, it wasn't like everyone's at headquarters here in the Bay Area and then I'm a remote employee, so I might not have experience with that particularly, but at IBM, I was working with engineers in Krakow, in Rome, in Singapore, Austin, North Carolina, depending on the project. And one thing that I learned was, it's impossible to have a team meeting with all of those time zones. So when I was thinking about staffing projects, I thought about it in terms of 2 time zones. So I could do California and Europe quite easily. It just meant our team meeting and our stand-ups would be at 9 o'clock in the morning for us, and that would be around 5 or 6 p.m. in the evening for Europe. And then for the folks in California working with Singapore, we did our stand-ups and our team meetings from 5 to 6 p.m. So I couldn't have the whole team cohesive, but I could have groups of people feeling connected with the other folks. And we would meet regularly for stand-ups over our conference calls. And we would also have them come visit once a quarter to be part of any offsites or team outings so that they wouldn't miss out on those. And also to come at the end of launching our product so that they could also celebrate with the team as well and get some face-to-face. But having clear goals and responsibilities was important here because having the stand-up, let's say for Singapore, it was the end of our California day. So it was important to talk about like, okay, this is how far I got and this is what's ready, like which would be ready for you to pick up, and talking about any bugs or issues. And it was also really a great handoff point. So people were very clear on what was ready to be picked up and what wasn't. So it was easy to do the follow the sun model by having frequent stand-ups.
All right, last question, if we can answer in a minute. Do you have a good outline on what to talk through in one-on-one?
So with a one-on-one, it's really the engineer's time. So it really varies on what they want to be talking about, but if there is nothing to talk about, I will ask them about how their weekend was. I will ask them just how they are, like getting to know them as a person. I know like, there's one engineer on my team, we bond over going to Healdsburg and Napa with our significant others, and also on Friday nights being excited to go home and grill a steak and have a bottle of wine because it's Friday and we're too lazy to go out for dinner, and San Francisco is impossible to get reservations for last minute. So there's certain things that we bond over, and as you build relationships with people, the conversation becomes more natural. I do have a one-on-one template that I use for new hires to get to know them, and it's kind of understanding how they like to work, what time they generally come in, how they prefer to receive feedback. And I also ask about their favorite baked goods so I can bribe them when I need to. And what else? I've got a whole list there. Yeah.
With that, thank you, Shivani.
Yeah, thank you.
You were great.